think it's worth a conversation about what it means to be for the community, to be, a church as an organization, an entity that exists for the good of the community in some particular ways that we think a relationship with Jesus and with other followers of Jesus, ways that can impact a community in good and positive ways, and how to keep that at the forefront of our mission as a church.
All right, Anson, we're back again. We wrapped up the Calling series.
We did.
And for those of you who tuned in for those conversations, thanks for being with us through that. We're about to turn a corner to a new sermon series called For God and Neighbor. And if you have listened to the podcast at all, or you're a part of our church and you've been coming for a while, that title may sound a lot like what we talk about on a regular basis. I mean, the name of this podcast is the For Lake Norman podcast, because we want to be, we want to serve God in such a way that we're also serving our neighbors in our community. And I want
to be for our neighbor.
Yeah. And so I'm very excited for this sermon series. I think it's going to be really awesome. So as you're listening to the podcast, want to also encourage you to visit our page, tune into the sermon series as they get posted later, or on the live stream if you want to join us for that. And so we thought today it would be fitting for us to just take a step back from diving into sermon content and just to talk about the mission and vision that God's given our church, and kind of what is our purpose here in the Lake Norman community.
Yeah. And it is connected to the sermon from this week.
Yes.
We're kicking off this series For God and Neighbor, and Jesus opens this section, Luke chapter 16, with a parable. We've been seeing a lot of parables, some of them super familiar, like Good Samaritan or the prodigal son, others of them a little bit less familiar. This is probably a little less familiar and more confusing. So I'll leave it to the sermon to unpack that. But the gist of it is Jesus tells this story about a dishonest manager who gets in trouble with his master, the owner of whatever the property was that he was working for. And he's going to lose his job. And the way that he goes about saving his neck is going to all of the debtors. So it's like, imagine an account manager or a salesman, for a company, and he's got these accounts and he's about to lose his job. And so he goes to the clients and he starts slashing what they owe. He's like, hey, what do you owe? I owe $1 million. Cut it to 700,000. What do you owe? I owe 20,000. Cut it to 12,000. And you think, you think Jesus is going to say what a bad thing this is, that he's robbing the master. But in fact, Jesus does the opposite. And what scholars think is going on there is he's cutting out his commissions. And what he had originally gotten in trouble for is sort of padding the debts to pad his own pockets. And when he got caught, and he knows not only is he out of favor with his boss, but he's going to be out of favor with everybody that he ever interacted with. And so he cuts his commissions. And Jesus, in a surprise twist in the parable, says he was commended for acting shrewdly. Like, he was pretty cunning and smart, because by cutting his commission out, he was gaining favor with everybody who had an account with his master. And as I've reflected on that parable and thought about just its relevance, I go, well, that actually is entirely the way that we think. Like,
Mhm.
I think about a purchase that I'm thinking about and what makes me nervous about it. I mean, you're in the market right now for a
Yeah.
car, right?
Yeah,
And
unfortunately.
what makes you nervous is, am I paying a fair price, or are they jacking up the price with all sorts of hidden fees and commissions and
Yeah.
whatever else? There's a great Seinfeld episode about that. The whole episode is in a car dealership, and George is paranoid about, you got to walk away. You got to walk away. Um, but yeah, this is something that, like, we know it happens. We don't want it to happen to us.
Mhm.
And so when a salesperson, comes to us and gives us what feels like a good deal, or we have a level of trust where we know, hey, this is a fair price. The salesperson, the company, they're getting a fair profit. I get that. They need to do that. But also, I'm not getting robbed,
Mhm.
right? So that gives us a good, we have favor toward that salesperson, that company, that product, or whatever. And I think that's what's going on in this parable that Jesus is telling. Like,
Mhm.
hey, here's a guy who went from kind of a shyster of a sales guy to selfless
Mhm.
and doing something for the good of both his clientele and the owner of the business. So everybody wins, and Jesus says, good on that guy.
Mhm.
And then the punchline in Luke 16:9, like the application that Jesus draws from that is, he says, I tell you, use your worldly wealth to gain friends so that in the coming life you'll enter eternal dwellings.
Mm.
And like, he's attaching using the material possessions that we have here for the purpose of, I mean, what the text says is gaining friends.
Yeah. How about that?
And then the surprising attachment on the end, and I mean, Jesus says, so that you will enter the eternal dwellings. And that's not an earn your salvation thing.
Right.
But I think what it is it's attaching what we do with the resources that we have says something about our heart,
Mhm.
and whether we are truly a child of God and a part of his kingdom is going to come out in the way that we handle our resources. And so that's the sermon text. I say more about that in the sermon, and I also apply it to our church and the mission and vision that we have as a church. And that parable, I think, doesn't just apply to us individually, but I think it applies to us as a church as well. I think it applies to organizations to follow this same principle. And it's one of the things that we're committed to at our church, is to use the resources that we are entrusted with. In our case, it's the giving, the generosity of our congregation,
Mhm.
almost exclusively.
Mhm.
Um, there's a stewardship that we have in that, to use those resources to reach people, to gain friends in our community. And it's right at the heart of what Jesus is teaching here and in other places. And it's right at the heart of the mission and vision that we've been called to. So I think it's good to think about not just that call in the parable, not just the moment we're at as a church, because we got some projects and some initiatives, and I talk about those in the sermon. But more broadly than that, what is it that we're hoping our use of resources will achieve for the sake of our community, for the sake of God and his work? And yeah, let's spend some time unpacking that a little bit, for the things that we're about, not just in this moment, but we want to be up, what we want to be about broadly.
Yeah. Yeah. And our whole mission vision as a church, and it's the tagline for this podcast,
Yeah.
is to bring healing, connection, and purpose to people all around Lake Norman through the love of Jesus. And so we've talked a lot about it a lot with our members, and a lot of them have been like, okay, but what does this piece of it really mean? Or what do we really mean when we say we want to bring healing? What
Yeah.
do we really mean when we say we want to bring connection and purpose? And so yeah, I think today's as good a day of any to kind of dive into the weeds on what each of those pieces mean.
Let's talk about that.
I would love to, because before we get into it, I will say, um, our mission and vision is deeply personal to me, and before it was even voiced, each of those aspects was the Lord was working in my life to have all of that be at play and me just growing in my relationship with Him. And a lot of those things I received through being a part of this church. And so I've talked briefly about it on the podcast before, but um, I was on staff as the student pastor. I was leading from a really unhealthy place, started questioning my purpose. Um, but there was a storm of multiple things happening at that season in my life. I think I had a lack of real, deep, authentic relationships outside of my wife. I had just poor habits in place, just living an unhealthy lifestyle. Didn't have a lot of hobbies, wasn't really taking care of my body, and so that led to a whole host of mental health issues. And then on top of that, the role I was in, I was starting to question if it was the right fit for me, and so started wrestling with sense of purpose. So literally all three of
Healing, connection,
yeah,
purpose. Yeah.
all three of those
Yeah.
aspects were at play in what I call, and it's a common term in spiritual circles, but my dark night of the soul.
Right.
And it was a really tough season of my life, and the Lord led me to step down from that role. I actually entered into a sales role after that, which I think I've talked about. And
Hopefully you didn't jack up your commissions so bad that,
no, but I am familiar. I know what happens behind the scenes, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know the profit margin percentages and
Yeah.
all how you got to play the game with all that stuff.
Sure.
So, but yeah, so I did that, and then it actually was probably a a worse place for me to be for healing, but also the best place for me to be
Right.
to start to heal. And continued attending this church at that time, and the Lord just really started to teach me a lot. He put healthier habits in place, like taking more time in prayer, um, having less distractions in my life with like my phone or watching TV. And it gave me the space to think about larger questions like, what is my purpose? What am I good at? What do I feel like I'm created for? Um, so I started to get clarity around that. I started working out more regularly, walking more regularly, eating better. And so my physical health improved. And with all of those things, my mental health started to improve as well. And went through a period of talking with my friends and realizing the gap that we had just because we weren't consistently seeing each other. We committed to meeting every Tuesday together and just being real and honest and open with one another, so that the Lord brought connection into my life at that point when I needed it most. Um, and yeah, I even went through this like 12-week long program that helped me gain so much clarity on what I feel like my purpose is, what I feel like I'm wired for, and how to help others do that. And so, um, uh, all during that time is when our church rolled out what the mission and vision
Right.
God's
Yeah.
given us is. And
Timely.
I just remembered it resonating so deeply with me because of what I had been through. And, when this position I'm in now was created, um, yeah, I came to you and said pretty much that, like, I want to be a part of what we're doing.
Yeah. Because I get it.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
because I feel it
Yeah.
deeply. And so, yeah, I'm excited for this conversation to
Yeah,
unfold.
me too. And I appreciate you sharing your personal story. And as you're talking, I'm remembering my own.
Mm,
And it was a few years before yours, before we actually moved down here to North Carolina. But there was an 8-year season in Illinois where I wrestled with all of those things as well.
mhm,
And like you said, I would consider it my dark night of the soul,
mm,
or another phrase, Pete Scazzaro, one of my favorites, uses as a journey through the wall.
mm,
And it's like you come to a place in life and you just run smack into the wall.
yeah,
And in some metaphysical, metaphorical way, you can't turn around and go backwards. You
mhm,
can't go around it or over it. The only way to get to the other side of the wall is to go through it.
mm,
And that image really landed powerfully with me of what would it feel like to be inside of like the Great Wall of China, big, thick wall,
mhm,
and somehow you're passing through solid cement.
mhm,
What might that feel like if that were physically possible?
mhm,
It'd feel dark.
mhm,
There'd be a lot of pressure, pushing in on you from all sides. You wouldn't have any idea how far you had come or how far you had left to go. It'd be real slow.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be cold. So just this image of sort of being inside of this thick wall in this season of life for me really was a strong image, but it had pieces of all of these things as well. So it was a season of healing for me. Kind of, it was a healing from the pathology of success, like a pathological need to perceive myself as successful, and to be at a certain place in life by a certain time that I just had not achieved. And things didn't go the way that I thought they were going to go in a couple of different roles. Lot was, fired from a position years before that. More recently, just was leading a church that we wound up, merging in with another church that just felt like a death to me. And so there were some things that just, had a very unhealthy codependence on a certain identity.
Mm-hmm.
And when things didn't pan out the way that I was dependent on them panning out, it was crushing for me. And so it took a long time through that journey, through that dark night, to find healing from that and to realize, okay, my identity is not in a certain very narrow definition of success, but that God can use me in ways that I would not have anticipated. And to help me see that, he brought some connections into my life, some people who helped me not be so myopic and go, really? Like, you think your whole life is worthless now? Like, it wasn't quite that dramatic, but I do remember a really wise friend helping me kind of expand my definition of how I could be impactful, using the gifts and abilities and role that I was in. And that rejuvenated my purpose. And then coming down here and taking the role here at our church was very much an affirmation of that, and stepping into something that I feel like fits the purpose that God created me for. And so I was well into that journey of healing through connection and finding purpose. Didn't have that. I wasn't putting that language on it at the time until a few years. Experiencing it, right? And I think that's why it resonated with me so strongly during that season where we were asking the question, how do you frame up our gospel mission for us here in our community? What is it that Jesus brings? And so that's why I think it jumped off the page at me just studying the Gospels. What was Jesus going around doing? Bringing people healing, bringing them connection with himself, with others, with God, and giving them purpose. And I thought, oh my goodness, like that's what he brought me. That's what he was bringing you. That's what he came to bring. And it was true in Jesus' day. It's true in our day. It's sort of this universal need that we all have. And so its impacts, its fruits of the gospel, of the good news of Jesus.
Yeah. And I, in both of our stories, and we've touched on it in multiple episodes of the podcast, but all three of those things are connected. Like, it's kind of hard to separate them and,
right.
Say, here's how he specifically brings this one or that one. There's some cases like that, but it's, our minds, our bodies, our souls are all interconnected.
Right.
And so a lot of these things work together, like having a lot of healthy relational connection and a good sense of purpose can make you feel more healthy as a person.
Amazing.
And,
and actually help your physical health.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I don't know how you're planning to tackle it, but do you want to tackle it one at a time, or
sure? Let's take it. So what do we mean when we say healing?
Yeah.
How would you frame it up?
Well, do you want me to say, because I know how we frame it up.
Go ahead and say how we frame it up.
Yeah. So we would frame it up in that healing takes place in kind of 4 different categories. So mental healing, emotional healing, spiritual healing, and physical healing.
Yeah.
And so, when we talk about how Jesus came to bring healing, you see examples in scriptures of how he did so in all 4 of those categories. And so we just believe he's not done bringing healing in all
Right.
4 of those categories. And we want to think about, as a church, how can we bring healing into each of those
Yeah.
categories?
As you think about our moment right now, like our community, our culture, which of those needs jumps out at you?
I would say, oh gosh, I could probably make an argument for each one of them.
Right.
I mean, the one I feel like you hear the most about right now is probably mental health. And then
Yeah.
I think un, it's almost like that's the tip of the spear. And then the root of a lot of people's mental health issues can branch out into some of those other categories. Like you may be mentally unhealthy because you're spiritually in a bad place or physically in a bad place, or you don't have a high emotional intelligence or health, or
Right.
you grew up in a home where you didn't know how to handle your emotions, and that can lead to a lot of stuff. So yeah, I guess that's how I would diagnose where our cultural moment is. Kind of mental health is that tip of the spear that gets talked about the
It
most,
does.
but
Yeah.
I think all the other categories are underlying even to that symptom, I guess, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah. I think you're probably right. I would agree with that. You hear more, see more on social media,
Mm-hmm.
read more articles about a mental health crisis
Mm-hmm.
in our culture, impact of smartphones and things like that on a
Mm-hmm.
on a generation. And yeah, I think that's real. I think that's something that um, is now being addressed by from a lot of different angles, helpfully.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think there's good psychology that can help. There's good, physical practices, all of those things. I also think the church, the Bible, Jesus
Mm-hmm.
has um, something to say as well that can speak into the mental health challenges that we face.
Mm-hmm.
I think a sense of identity, um, the just doing life without the grounding and the mooring of being created by a God who loves you, who made a plan for your life, our life here, and for
Mm-hmm.
eternity. There's a there's a rootedness and a settling to that I think creates a foundation for a healthy mental
Mm-hmm.
life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that the wheels aren't always spinning trying to create an identity for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I think sure there's lots of connections that can be made between our spiritual identity and our mental health. But I think there's just something fundamental about knowing, believing that we are connected to a God who loves us.
Mm-hmm.
That's a grounding for improving, bettering our mental health.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, my journey, my personality is whenever something new comes into my life, like having to buy a car for the first time, I will obsessively dive into learning like as much as I possibly can about that subject. That's just how
Mhm.
I've always kind of been wired. So when I got in a really bad mental health spot, I was trying to soak up as much information as I could about it. And what I found interesting is all the resources I would keep going back to is, they would, some of them were secular, some of them were Christian, but the secular ones I realized very rooted in science, but these science practices they were talking about are very rooted in the Bible.
Yeah.
Like you find them in scripture. And Matt Chandler, I was listening to a podcast where he made a joke about this too, how science is always catching up to things that the Bible's been saying for thousands of
Right.
years. And there was one book in particular I read called How God Changes Your Brain. It's written by 2 guys who are not Christian. They're actually, if I remember correctly, one's agnostic and one's an atheist. And one of those, they're both neuroscientists. One of them is like renowned in the top 30 neuroscientists in the
Hmm.
world globally. And just the stuff that their research showed about what a belief in God, spiritual practices actually do to reshape your mind is incredible.
Right.
And it's stuff that we see in scripture. And they even talk about, I think a lot of people and even therapists can push people towards spiritual practices to try and help with their mental health. But a lot of it is like Eastern meditation and some, it's more tied to like stuff you find in Buddhism or something like that.
Right.
Um, but in this book, they actually show that the effect that specifically prayer has over just a form of Eastern meditation it's substantially better for your brain and your mental health. And there's other examples too that they talk about,
Right.
like what you believe about God and how that shapes you as a person and all kinds of interesting stuff. But I do think, like, I was glad you brought up the neuroscience thing, because I do think that's a conversation worth having, also realizing that science is just kind of coming behind what the Bible's been saying for thousands of years and proving what God's been telling us the whole time
Yeah.
that we should do. And that has been um, a profound faith builder for me, just in trusting in the reliability of the scriptures, um, and that just knowing that God truly does want what's best for us.
I agree. And we would also both say there's a role for good counseling, for good
Yes,
therapy. There's a
absolutely.
place for the right diagnosis in terms of, or
Absolutely.
prescription in terms of medication at times. I wouldn't say that just read the Bible and
Yeah,
pray
yeah,
and you're all good. We wouldn't
yeah.
say that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and my experience with mental health, I mean, I've talked about my journey with anxiety, and for me, the worst episodes would happen in the middle of the night, where just I would be in this,
Mm-hmm.
panic, convinced I'm having a heart attack and I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to live through the night. And I just can't slow that motor down. But the thing when nothing else would get me through the night, there were a few nights, and I remember them vividly,
Mm-hmm.
where sort of reciting the Psalms, like just scriptures that I had committed to memory that reminded me of God's love for me, that sort of retrained my brain to go, you're not alone. There is a God who sees you, who loves you, who knows exactly what's going on in your body, who has a purpose for you. And those truths,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I lived it in the moment. Like it settles the mind.
Yeah.
And I think that's both true in a moment of panic, and I think it's also true more foundationally. It lays a secure
Mm-hmm.
foundation that prevents us from going off the rails as easily as we might otherwise. I think emotional health is
Mm-hmm.
another one. Again, Pete Scazzaro is very helpful in sort of opening my eyes to some of these things. His sort of truism or mantra is you can't be spiritually mature while remaining emotionally immature.
Mm-hmm.
And so he just talks about the dual paths of growing in spiritual maturity in line with growing in emotional
Mm-hmm.
maturity, and our willingness to not be offended quite so
Yeah.
easily,
Resilience. Yeah.
emotional resilience.
Mm-hmm.
Think things like, when we're more humble and we feel less entitled,
Mm-hmm.
then we're going to respond with more maturity and
Mm-hmm.
grace and kindness in situations
Yeah.
where otherwise our pride might be wounded,
Yeah.
and we would, lash out in anger.
Mm-hmm.
So all sorts of different ways that emotional maturity and spiritual maturity go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
And to become a spiritually mature person requires emotional growth, emotional health.
Yeah.
Because if we remain emotionally immature and perpetually offended and stuck in anger and reactive,
Mm-hmm.
emotions all of the time, that's going to be a huge barrier for us
Mm-hmm.
taking steps of of spiritual maturity that calls us to be others focused, that calls us to be selfless, it calls us to be more preoccupied with what is going on in the life of someone else
Mm-hmm.
than my own life. And that's almost like the fundamental thing of, as that's what emotional maturity does. We become more aware of other people's needs. When we're
Mm-hmm.
emotionally immature, all we can see is our own needs,
Mm-hmm.
like a baby.
Yep. And that becomes abundantly clear when you get married or have a kid. From what
That's
well,
right.
the kid part is what I hear.
It's coming.
It's what I hear from others, but
Yes.
I know firsthand when you get married, that becomes abundantly clear.
We learn just how emotionally immature we are, how
Yes.
selfish we are.
Yeah. But God gives us the gift of marriage to help us mature emotionally.
So if we're going to become selfless, spiritually mature people, and I do think that's one of the things that it just boils down to in terms of spiritual health. Spiritual is just the journey from being selfish and self-absorbed to being selfless, to being others focused. And that's why love. I mean, love is the central defining mark of spiritual maturity, and love is an outward focused, others focused emotion. And so I think mental health, emotional health are both intimately tied up with our spiritual health. When we're mentally unhealthy, when we're emotionally unhealthy, it's going to be very hard to become spiritually healthy. But when we are mentally healthy, growing in emotional health, that's going to fuel and support. And it's like you said, healing, connection, purpose feed off each other. They're connected. All of these forms of health are. And then I think that connects into physical health as well. I think when Christians, just generally you hear people talk about, oh, go to church and find healing. For many, you're picturing like charismatic, lay your hands on and be healed, and
let me pray for your broken leg.
Or you have these images of a TV evangelist, and people spazzing out and all the things. That's not what we mean.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that physical healing doesn't happen. I think it does happen.
And I do think we should pray.
I think we should absolutely pray for God to bring physical
and we should
healing.
believe that he can. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Exactly.
But we don't want to, what's the word? I don't know. I'll think of it later.
When people show up at our church, they're not going to find us laying our hands on people and then them, being miraculously healed right then. That's not the way that the Spirit is manifesting himself in our presence.
Yep.
And that's not what we're primarily meaning when we say healing. But in all of these other ways, we want to be for our community. We want to be for Lake Norman. And just like the best way for somebody to be a healing agent in someone else's life, to be healthy themselves, it's like put on the air mask, the oxygen mask before you put it on your neighbor. The healthier we are as a church, the more we can offer to our community. And so I think for us, as we think about back to the parable that we started with, using our resources as a church to gain friends, to be agents of good in other people's lives in and around our community, in many ways, it starts with our own healing and seeking to be agents of healing for those around us. So that's a central. It's both a central element in our mission and vision, and I think it's also a starting point in many ways to opening us up for connection and for purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that piece resonates so much. And I appreciate what you said about the identity piece when it comes to all these different aspects of healing. There's a song I love by a band called the Red Clay Strays. The name of it is God Does. And they have this line that says, even with a map, sometimes I don't know where to go, but I know that God does. So when you're in those moments where you're like questioning your purpose, or you're struggling with anxiety, or just struggling with depression, like a lot of times it's because we feel lost and we feel like we're just in this hamster wheel, just like constantly turning and not going anywhere. And it's like, even in those moments, if we've experienced that spiritual healing and we have a relationship with God and he's our grounding point, even though we may not know where to go, and even if we have a map and still don't know where to go, God does. And we can rest in that, and it does bring this sense of peace and healing in the midst of those situations. And yeah, like we said, there's there's different degrees to all of it. Sometimes um, a small change in your life can lead to you becoming mentally healthier. For others, it's going to be a journey, and it might take a while,
Right.
and it might take a lot of counseling and a lot of therapy. It might take some medication. Um, so it just, really depends on the situation and the person.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that it's I'm glad it's being talked about more in our culture. And I really do think the gospel and the church has not just something to offer in that space, but like the thing to
Yeah.
offer
Yeah. I agree.
in that conversation.
I agree. And last thing I'll say about this, and we'll move on to
Mhm.
connection. Another way I like to think about it is healing is both from brokenness to wholeness
Mhm.
and also from wholeness to fullness.
Yeah, that's a good way to
So,
think about
and
it.
we're all in a different place. And in different areas of life, we're in different places.
Mhm.
So when we're broken, that's when we're most aware of our need.
Mhm.
And that is an area of healing to get to a place of wholeness. Just like it would be, and you break your arm and you're wearing a cast and you keep that cast on until the bone sets. That bone was broken and now it's rejoined and now it's whole. And all right, I can use my arm again. Well, now you need to build that muscle strength back up. And
Mhm.
so from wholeness to fullness is getting stronger and getting healthier and more functional in all these different ways, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. So I think the journey's never done
Mhm.
because the goal is not just, oh, I'm no longer broken.
Yep.
Now there's a whole new journey of getting from wholeness to fullness. And I'll say for me, I think that top part of the journey is harder in some ways than moving from brokenness to wholeness, because when we're experiencing brokenness, it's so much more tangible, like we can
Mhm.
see it.
And you're like, "I've gotta do something."
I'm in pain.
Yeah.
I want to get out of pain,
Mhm.
whatever kind of pain it is,
Mhm.
physical, mental, emotional. And so you're motivated to deal with it. But then when we kind of get to a place of wholeness and the pain subsides,
Mhm.
our motivation
Mhm.
tends to slip. I think it's why a lot of people will show up at church when something's really going wrong in life.
Mhm.
But when things get better and things are okay, and I don't feel like it's a 5 alarm fire and I'm crying out to
Mhm.
Jesus, well, I'm okay again. And now
Yep.
I'll slide out and kind of do
Yeah.
things my own way until it all breaks down again.
Mhm.
And then I'm back again.
Yeah.
But I think to be truly healthy, we need to learn the practices, and we talk about practices a lot, of not just sliding back down into brokenness, but of building strength,
Mhm.
building muscle for a lifetime of getting healthier and
Mhm.
healthier from wholeness to fullness. And I think that's where we really want to be.
Mhm. Mhm.
So yeah, I think that's our vision for what it means. And when we
Yeah.
think about our community and a vision for our community, we want to see people in our community getting healthier
Mhm.
and playing a. We want to have an opportunity to play a part in that,
Mhm.
to see people in our community getting healthier mentally, emotionally, even physically, because of their journey of getting healthy spiritually,
Yeah.
and seeing these things come together in life. And the more that we have the opportunity to help people in our community take that journey, that's what it's all about.
Yeah. Yeah. I absolutely agree. And it's just that I think it's John 10:10, Jesus says, "I came to bring life
Yep.
and bring it to the full."
Hmm.
And I think that's what we mean by that, brokenness to wholeness, wholeness to fullness. It's like that's the trajectory Jesus wants us on. He
Absolutely.
wants to make our lives full. And to do that, he invites us into a new way of life. So part of that new way of life
Good transition.
comes with connection. Yeah.
All right. Frame up connection for us.
Yeah. So the way we talk about it is just meaningful, healthy connections in our lives to God, first and foremost, but also to his people, and then also to family and friends. And, um, you could expound it out to a million
Right.
different connections. But I think what we mean when we say connection is not just a superficial, like you and I have something in common,
Right.
therefore we hang out and do whatever the thing is that we have in common, but it goes a little bit deeper than that to where it's a more meaningful um, relational connection that gives us that joy that relationships can provide,
Right. I
and
agree.
that comes from God and from each other.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And we want to see people growing in that connection, and we want to discover and use the tools that help with that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, how do you grow in connection? Fundamentally, it starts with just showing up
Mm-hmm.
and creating spaces and opportunities for people to be around each other, to cultivate those connections, what we have in common, common areas of growth. Um, because if we're not doing life together in some ways, I think fundamentally, in many ways, that's what churches provide at a
Mm-hmm.
very basic level,
Mm-hmm.
is a connecting space for people
Mm-hmm.
fundamentally around their relationship with God. But then it also touches so many other things.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about being a church that's for our community, and we realize, well, most of our community probably doesn't have a relationship with God, at least not in the way that we think
Mm-hmm.
of it. And so how can we build a bridge of connection
Mm-hmm.
with other areas that we have in common? Coming back to healing, we did areas of mental health or emotional health, because we're all on a journey. We want to see people connecting in a way that's going to be life-giving and healthy
Mm-hmm.
for, yeah, within their families. So healthy marriages, healthy
Mm-hmm.
parent-child, child-parent, sibling relationships, healthy neighborhood kinds of relationships, just being neighborly.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about the new neighborhood that you're in, and just
Yeah.
the example of people reaching out and connecting with each other. Like, we want to be a catalyst
Mm-hmm.
for those kinds of things. We want to
Mm-hmm.
be the kinds of neighbors in our communities that are the initiators of those sorts of connections.
Mm-hmm.
We've also, and you've done a lot of this in your role at the church, as an organization, we want to establish healthy connections with other organizations.
Mm-hmm.
You've made some good relationships with Huntersville and different organizations in our community, but businesses, restaurants, especially others who have a similar desire to see our community be a healthy place.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of layers of connection that we want to be a part of in our community, not connecting just for the sake of connecting, but that's where the love of Jesus begins to come out, even if we're not talking about spiritual things in a particular moment. Just a posture of love and of serving and of taking an interest in somebody else in our community builds connections, and we want to be those kind of people, and we want to be that kind of an organization, a kind of a church that functions in a way that creates the kinds of connections that will be bridges
Mm-hmm.
for the Holy Spirit to work. And
Yeah.
I think he does.
Yeah. And I almost think everyone does have a relationship with God, whether it's a negative one or a positive
That
one.
that is true.
And just like we've talked about in all the larger categories, but then in the healing category, like these two things are inseparable.
Yeah.
So like the way in which our church has healthy connections and loves one another actually puts on display the type of
Yeah.
relationship we have with God. And that can be healthy or unhealthy.
Right.
And I think our God being what we would say is God is the source of relationship because he exists in relationship in the Trinity. And again, we've brought this up before and we're not going to unpack the Trinity. We don't have time for that. If you have questions, you can
Another
reach out.
podcast.
Yeah. Um, but he has eternally existed in this communal love between Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And we're told in Genesis that we're created in his image, which also means that we're created for that communal love. And the first problem in the scriptures is not when Eve takes the fruit. Genesis 2:18, God looks at Adam and says, "It's not good for man to be alone. therefore I'll create a helper fit for him. And I think it applies more broadly than just to Adam in that specific moment, but I think as humans, it is not good for us to be alone. And our creator who is relational has wired that into us. And so when we experience loneliness and isolation, we're not experiencing that full life that he wants for us. And we're not experiencing the joy that he wants for us because that's how we're wired. That's what we're created for. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, in our society, I mean, the Surgeon General of the United States has said that loneliness is one of the greatest health epidemics that we're facing
Right.
in our society today. And you just, if you actually dive into the statistics on loneliness, isolation, friendship, it is heartbreaking.
Right.
Um, one study showed that over 50% of Americans say that they don't have one friend in which they can share everything with. They can't even name one person that they can
Hmm.
have that relationship with. And, we talked about therapy and counseling. It's estimated another 30 to 40% of people who go to therapy say they do so because they don't have anyone else that they
It's
can
like their
talk to.
paid friend.
Yeah. And it's heartbreaking. And so again, because of what we believe about who God is, that should shape what we believe about our responsibility to have healthy relational connections with one another and extend that out to a world that desperately needs it. Like again, I think the church there's a lot of people probably speaking into this issue, but I think the church has maybe the best answer ever for how to help us experience the deep, authentic relational connections that will actually be what's best for us.
Right. I agree. I want to come back to something you said about loneliness. And it's interesting. I just read an article, I think it was yesterday, that basically said that exact same thing, that
Mhm.
loneliness is this epidemic in our culture. I wonder, do you think most people would identify as being lonely, or if asked, "Hey, are
Mhm.
you lonely?" No, I'm not lonely.
Mhm.
Um, but if they were asked a follow-up question, like you just said, is there anybody in your life that
Yeah.
you have the kind of relationship that you could share anything with, that they might say, well, no.
Mhm.
So I guess what I'm wondering is, can we be lonely and not realize we're lonely? Can that be our problem?
Mhm.
And we don't even recognize it?
I can say firsthand, yes, you can. Um, yeah, that was a big part of my story. I mean, I worked in ministry. It was my first full-time job in ministry, and I'm highly extroverted. And so often I was surrounded by people. Um, but I still felt alone. And it was because in a false understanding and a prideful view of myself, I was newly married. I was in this leadership role. And in my mind, I got my wife looking up to me. I have these people looking up to me.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, I cannot show weakness. I need to be the example. I got to
Yeah.
have it all together. And so I was hiding things that I was wrestling with and dealing with silently. And so I was not being fully known by anybody, which made me feel alone because, and that includes even my wife.
Right.
Um,
You were around a lot of people. You're an
yes.
extroverted guy. You're friendly,
Mm-hmm.
generally happy,
Mm-hmm.
but inwardly felt, I'm all alone. Like
Yeah.
nobody gets me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because I was just carrying all this stuff that I was pushing down, that I was hiding, and I mentioned in the beginning how God kind of nudged me towards leaning back into friendships that I had had for a while and being more intentional with it. And I think I think that's a big piece of what separates Christian community. And we've talked about this on the podcast before, but just having a space where you can be fully known and also you can fully know someone else. Because
Right.
that's the thing where there's actually studies that talk about like therapy can be helpful in helping you learn more about yourself, but where it breaks down and how it can't contribute to change as much as the type of community that we're talking about is you're being completely vulnerable to the therapist or counselor, but very often they're not ever going to
Interesting.
be
Yeah.
vulnerable.
They're not reciprocating that side of the relationship.
Right. Right. So it's almost like you're talking to a mirror to help you learn more about yourself, and that's not all therapy and counseling. That's just a generic.
But I think that's a fair,
Yeah, and
observation.
it's a good thing.
Yeah.
And because I've been in counseling, I've benefited greatly from it. I've learned so much more about myself.
And it's not billed to be a relationship.
Exactly.
That's not what it's there for.
Yeah, you're there for a purpose. You're trying to
Correct.
work through something.
It's a clinical thing.
Yeah, but the joy that we feel from relational connections comes when it's that two-way street of being fully known.
Right.
And there's you have someone that knows you can share anything with. You want to share your highest moments with them, and you want to share your lowest moments with them, and vice versa.
Yeah.
It really doesn't feel good in relationships when you're constantly sharing about
Yeah.
the stuff you're going through,
One-sided.
and they just never divulge any information.
And that can feel very alone.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I've got like a sermon series brewing in my head here, like alone or not alone,
Uh-huh.
because I think most, myself included, I would have a suspicion that many of us might be lonelier than we realize.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly than we want to admit, because we're not identifying those categories as being symptoms of loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, just the word loneliness doesn't really resonate. Like it doesn't hit me in a personal way. But when you talk about feeling alone in life, like what I'm trying to do or to be, I'm getting support from nobody. Nobody, is in this with me, trying to lifting alongside of me. Oh, that hits. Like I know what that feels like, to feel like I am all alone shouldering whatever the burden might be.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't think of myself as a lonely person.
Mm-hmm.
But connecting those two things, I absolutely can see how aloneness is a deep, deep issue in our culture, in our churches, in our lives. And I do think another thing you said is true. I would agree with that. Christianity fundamentally addresses that loneliness, that aloneness at the core in a way that you just don't find in secular culture. We do some practices around here. We talk about prayer, rest, relationships, and work as four pillars of a rule of life that we organize our life around, that we build time and to invest. I'm a part of a core group of men. We meet once a week, and sometimes we go through a short reading of content around some of these topics. Other times we just talk about, random spiritual topics together. We always talk about something as well as just life. But we were going through some readings from Comer, John Mark Comer's Practicing the Way, and we were focusing on relationships. And the particular reading that we were doing was on silence and solitude as a spiritual practice. I would not intuitively connect those two things. Working on the importance of connection and relationship in life, and taking time alone for silence and solitude. In fact, it sounds like those would be opposites.
Yeah.
Because silence and solitude seems isolating from others. But when we got into these readings, the thing that surprised me and really started to resonate was intentional spiritual solitude is not aloneness. It's a one-on-one time between you and God. And we've got to get away from other people. We've got to get away from other responsibilities, do our best to get away from, the mental, churn of life. The more we can peel ourselves away from those things and find space to be alone with God in a one-on-one relationship, that's the core connection that we need. And that's how it happens when we build in a practice of pulling away from some of the more surface connections, as important as those might be,
Mm-hmm.
to connect with the most fundamental relationship, and that is our spiritual relationship with God. And you're right, everyone has a relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
Either it's an estranged relationship
Mm-hmm.
or a connected relationship or somewhere in
Somewhere in
between.
between. Yep.
And there is no perfect, relationship
Mm-hmm.
in life or with God as far as our in this life
Yeah.
on our end. So I think when we talk about connection as a church, fundamentally, yeah, it's that learning to have a personal one-on-one relationship with God. Fundamentally, that's the fundamental connection that Jesus came to offer and to bridge
Mm-hmm.
the gap of our sin and waywardness so
Mm-hmm.
that we have an opportunity to have that kind of a healthy connection.
Mm-hmm.
And then out of that, what do we want for ourselves and the people of our community that we're serving? We want to have healthy connections in that inner circle of life, our family and friends, the people that are closest to us as individuals. I would include like coworkers and
Mm-hmm.
neighbors, like the circle of life of the people that we just spend the most time with
Yeah.
individually. And then I think another thing that we have to offer to our community is our church
Mm-hmm.
connection.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not the only church around, and certainly we're not the only church that's trying to be healthy and to create these circles, but to be a part of a church. I'm reading a book right now about the value of just committing and being a part of regularly attending a church
Mm-hmm.
is enormously healthy, brings healing in all sorts of ways, mental, spiritual,
Mm-hmm.
emotional, even physical, like statistics, data
Yeah.
over time and studies that show regular church attendance and active participation is enormously healthy.
Mm-hmm.
So that connection crosses over. So creating that kind of a connecting environment as a church, and that's not a given.
Mm-hmm.
Churches can be profoundly unhealthy places. It
Yeah.
takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
I think you and I both have been a part of churches that
Yeah.
in those seasons we would say that was not a healthy
Mm-hmm.
place. So I think it's something that we need to work at always as a church to
Mm-hmm.
say, for our own well-being and for the good of our community, we want to work hard and put in the effort to be a healthy church community, because that's a level of connection that needs to happen. And then out of that, I think we flow outward to the community as a connection and to be a well-connected community that loves and serves people that are farther from us.
Mm-hmm.
They're down the street, but they're not in our inner circle that we interact with all the time. And to do everything that we can, one of the things that's compelling to me anyway, we have the privilege of being in one of the fastest growing suburbs in the country right now. So the Charlotte area, the Lake Norman suburbs, we're growing at a faster clip than most.
Mm-hmm.
So we're in that top percent of high growth areas. What that means is our community is always changing
Mm-hmm.
because people are always coming in. And so it's being shaped and formed into something different than it was 10, 20, 30 years ago. And we have an opportunity to speak into that and to make some intentional connections in our community that are going to bring healing in lots of different ways, that are going to strengthen our connectivity and relationships in many ways as well. So connected with God, connected with our inner circle, connected with our church, connected with our community. In all those ways, we want to be healthy.
Yeah.
We want that healing to apply to these connections, and we want that not just for ourselves, but for as many people as we can connect with in our community.
Yeah. And going back to why I think loving God and having that connection and loving others and having those connections are inseparable is because of the fact that as a humans, we make a muck of relationships. We all have I know I have been the perpetrator of broken relationships, but also I've experienced broken relationships. And, you grow up in environments and you see something modeled that shapes you as a person.
Yeah.
And when you get older, you have to unlearn that. And so, we talk about churches can go through unhealthy seasons. Well, yeah, because we're all human. That's why we need that connection to God. So, it's almost the same concept from brokenness to wholeness to fullness. Like our connection to God is so he can bring us from brokenness in relationships to hopefully a better place of wholeness in
Yeah. A healthy
relationships
relationship.
in a church community.
Right.
And then as that church community loves one another and loves God and loves the community well, hopefully it's on its trajectory to fullness. And I think it's helpful to remind ourselves of that when we make a muck of relationships within a church, because I mean, church hurt and deconstruction are all like hot button
Sure.
words to talk about right now. Um, but you know, I still think the church is the just the best place to figure relationships out, because you have someone who's an example of what ultimate love should look like,
Right.
that you can look to, that can empower you by a spirit, that when you mess up, there's mercy and grace and restoration and healing. And so right now, it's hard to pick a favorite out of the three categories. I would say the connection bucket is like, I just feel like the Lord's been putting it in my face over and over and over again. And it, all those areas of healing dramatically improved when I committed to my connections with God and with others.
Right.
So yeah, I'm
Pro connection.
pro connection. Yes.
You've said many times, rightly so, that it kind of belongs in the middle. Healing, connection, purpose,
Yep.
because it is the connection. And I think, too, when we talk about healing and the need for healing, for many of us, more often than not, it's a relationship
Mm-hmm.
that needs healing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a broken connection
Mm-hmm.
with a spouse, with a
Mhm.
family member, with a friend, with a church,
Yeah.
with work relationships. Like we struggle through life with broken relationships that are suffering from deep, deep disconnection. And so one of the areas that we need healing most is healing in our relationships, which is exactly what you just said, from brokenness to wholeness in terms of our connection with others, and then from wholeness to fullness in those
Mhm.
connections. So healing and connection are absolutely overlapping. And we won't spend as much time on purpose just for the sake of time, but
Mhm.
discovering our purpose is a key pillar. So frame that one up for us.
Yeah. So we believe God has created every human being with a purpose, and He's uniquely gifted and wired each of us um, to carry out certain purposes in life. Now, I, I would venture to say that we're not going to say God has this one very specific purpose for you, and if you're outside of that, you're outside of God's will.
Right.
Um, But there will be times in your life where God will make it clear, like, this is what I've created you for, and this is what you've meant to do. And it's not always that He, speaks and is like, here, do this, but it's through your experiences you kind of get an understanding of how His Spirit has wired you and created you. Or at least that's been my experience,
Yeah.
of just trying things and becoming more self-aware. I heard pastor talking about the passage where in the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus says, "Why do you want to remove the speck in your brother's eye when you have a plank in your own eye?" And he was talking about how that's a call for self-reflection and self-awareness. And I think ultimately, when we're talking about purpose, a lot of us don't give ourselves space to think about what our purpose is because we distract ourselves to death. But B, we we don't know ourselves well enough to articulate or have an understanding of what our purpose is. So I may be getting too far ahead of myself, but on
I'm
a
just sitting
larger
here
scale,
thinking there are so many paths we could go down in
I
this
know.
piece of the conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So just to sum up, we believe God's created everyone with a
100%.
unique purpose and gifting. And so we want to help people find that.
I agree. And that's part of how He created us. We believe every human being was created in God's image. And so in a very meaningful way, we're a reflection of God Himself. And each of us carries a little piece. It's an imperfect piece. It's a limited piece, but we have the fingerprint of God on us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a pretty cool, life-giving reality. And I think about it just practically. We kind of talk about four pieces of each of these categories: healing, connection, purpose. when I think about purpose, I think there all of us has a unique set of abilities. Like we
Mhm,
have just some natural abilities, and then we have some cultivated abilities that have gotten improved upon through experience.
mhm,
So we have unique experiences. Both of those shape our purpose.
mhm,
The things that we can do well, the experiences that we've been through, that those abilities have been honed in. A third category, I think, is opportunities. We all have different opportunities that come our way to leverage our abilities and our experience.
mhm,
And then the more sort of fundamental category is our identity. So our identity, that piece, that who we are, not so much what we do, but who we are, has
mhm,
a purpose as well. And we find purpose in who we were created to be and who created us
mhm,
in all those things. I think a mistake I made in this area for a long time, and it's very much connected to the story I was telling you earlier of just the mental, the lack of mental health that I had, was defining my purpose in terms of a role or a
mhm,
particular
mhm.
job.
Yeah.
And that's just way, way, way too narrow.
Mhm,
um, you could accomplish the same core purpose in a lot of different settings,
mhm,
and it doesn't have to be a specific job at a specific place with a specific set of responsibilities. And I think that's a trap that a lot of us fall in, is we go, I want to find my purpose. And that purpose means I need to have, I better get this job,
mhm,
because if I don't get this job, or I don't get this promotion, or if I can't get into this school to
mhm.
get this training to go to this place, I'm going to miss my purpose in life.
Yeah,
And I think it's an enormous amount of pressure
yeah.
on those moments in life, and also just an unhealthy definition of purpose. I
Mhm,
think a much healthier purpose, definition of purpose, is recognizing the kind of impact that God can have on the world through us, and that we're
mhm,
uniquely required, we're uniquely equipped for that, with our abilities, experiences, and opportunities to lean into our identity. And it might be in this job. It might be in a whole different vocation or setting than we might imagine. And if we're open to that, I think that opens up a whole world of opportunities to lean into our purpose in lots of different ways and
mhm,
lots of different places. And honestly, that was a big piece of my healing journey, was realizing, oh, my purpose in life isn't tied down
mhm,
to this one thing that didn't happen.
mhm.
So now I'm devastated and I don't have any more purpose. Well, no. It
Yeah.
just was that was not a healthy way
Mhm.
to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that 12-week course I mentioned that I went
Right.
through, one of the biggest benefits I got out of it was they had, what they called the 3 Ps. So it was, your purpose, your passion, and then they they said your principles, but it's your values,
Yeah.
but they had to make it 3 Ps. I mean, it's almost,
Yeah.
and this was not a
I'm
Baptist
fine with
organization.
alliteration. It's all
Yeah.
right.
This was not a Baptist thing either,
Yeah.
so I was like, "Wow." Um but that was helpful for me because the way they talked about, they actually have you write a purpose statement, and to this day, I have it on a sticky note on
Mhm.
my monitor on my, desk, and, they encourage you to put it up in your house as well, but, um, it's just a one sentence that's broad in the sense of, like, this is what I'm created to do, and mine has nothing to do with a specific role, or I could do it in any context,
Mhm.
but I feel like that's what my purpose is. Then your principles or values are obviously like what is most important to you in life. And there was a practice where you go through and you like brain dump as many things as you can think of, and then you go through a process of ranking them and figuring out like, okay, what matters to me most in life. And then the passion one might have been the most beneficial because it gets at what you're talking about of like what we do doesn't necessarily have to be a role, but then understanding what gets you out of bed in the morning and what motivates you will help you figure out what direction you need to take once you figure out generically what do I feel like my purpose is. So they broke it down into 4 categories, and they called them passion switches. So you have a who passion switch, a what passion switch, a why passion switch, and a how passion switch. So if you're
That's hard to say.
it is.
Passion switch.
I know, I was
That's
about to trip up saying it a lot.
You just said it like 4 times in a row and you didn't trip over it, but I was waiting. That's a hard one.
Yeah, I felt it coming, so I got it. I got through it. I'm probably not going to say it anymore.
Passion switch 5 times fast.
Yeah. So the who category is, man, you do what you do solely because of the people. Like whether it's you're doing it for, like, you work a certain job for the sake of your spouse, your family, or you do what you do for the sake of your business partner, your fellow employees, your coworkers, or you do what you do for the customers you work with and those people.
Who?
It's all centered around people. What would be, you just love every aspect of what you do, and that's what gets you out of bed in the morning. So an example they often use is like a guy who owns a car dealership, and he loves every aspect of running that car dealership. He loves selling the cars. He loves filling inventory. He loves washing the cars. He loves
just loves cars.
Yeah, just everything about it. The service department, all of it.
What?
Yeah. And then why would be, you do what you do because it serves a purpose greater than yourself. So, and that can be a lot of things. But it's really important to you that what you do matters and has some sort of significance beyond just your immediate needs. And then how would be kind of that type A perfectionist personality where they do what they do to be the best at it and to do it better than anybody else. And that's what motivates them and drives them. And you can have more than one of these passion switches. So when I originally went through it, I thought, because I'm a highly relational person, I thought who was number one. But over time, the more I reflected, I actually realized that why was top of the list for me.
Okay.
Which made sense because when I was in the sales role, sales is still very highly relational, but I still felt like I wasn't really operating in what I feel like God's wired me and created me to do. And then, coming back into working at a church, I am serving. I feel like I'm serving.
Definitely pulls that why lever more directly.
Yeah. But I would say who is probably the second one on the list for me. And then, I've talked through this with my wife, Haley. She is a who first, but how is her second one. She's that type A kind of driven personality where she just wants to do everything really well. And, but she is highly motivated by the people around her. So that helped me know what path forward to take when it came to choosing a career path, because it's like, okay, I know what my values are. I know what is really important to me. I have the guiding light of this purpose statement I've written for myself. And here's what actually motivates me and gets me out of bed every day. And if I have something that has that switch, I'm probably going to do a much better job at it than if I'm doing something that does not operate in my passion switches.
That's a really good framework. So I think if somebody's, like just asking this question, or even not even like with a burning, like, I got to find my purpose. But I think for anybody, even as you're talking, I'm just thinking about my own wiring, and that's helpful.
Yeah.
It's helpful to kind of to think through some of those things.
Yeah. And I'll give credit where credit's due. That comes from a couple named Steph and Shay Shafidal.
Okay.
I just want to give credit to them because
Props
it
to
was
them.
really helpful for me.
Yeah, that's it. So I'll offer a framework that was helpful to me, and then maybe we can wrap up.
Yeah.
And I've shared it, or you've heard me talk about this, but book by Todd Wilson called More? Is that the name of the book? I remember the author. But one of his principles is study yourself like a private investigator. So it's like, there's a lot of personality tests out there. We talked about the Enneagram recently, Myers-Briggs, DISC profile, all these different working genius. He's like, they all have some value to help you understand yourself and your wiring. They all approach it from different ways. There's not one silver bullet that's going to nail down all those things. But he says, learn as much as you can using these various tools, and then ask yourself this question: what's the switch that I just cannot turn off? Like when I walk into a room, when I go through life, what is it that you always go there? You always default to whatever that thing is. And can you sum that up, knowing everything that you can about yourself, in 2 words? And it's just this forced exercise to go, okay, what's the primary switch that I can't turn off? So like some people are fixers and they go through life seeing like
problems.
They see a problem and they want to fix it. Like that's just a switch. It just can't turn off. And so just different people are motivated by different things. And so doing that exercise for me helped me to see that I go through life seeing like what something can be. And it's different than being a fixer, I think, but maybe somehow related. But it's this aspect of vision. And it helped me to see that I need to be attached to a vision and have an ability to speak into it and see it, because it's a switch I can't turn off. Like I'll walk into some, business or something. Notoriously, it was a new restaurant that opened out in our area. And I went there to eat one time. I was excited about this new restaurant. I was like, so glad we needed a new restaurant like this. This is going to be great. And I walked in and my daughter and I ate there, and it was just obvious right out of the gate. It was like, I feel sad because this restaurant's not going to make it. And I wish someone would come through the door and ask me, Anson,
what would you do?
Give me a vision for how we can succeed as a restaurant. I have no business. I don't know anything about restaurants, but I knew that experience that we had with the food, the service, the portions, the competition around the corner. I was like, there's just no way. There's no way this place is going to make it. And I can see it. I can see what they need to do. Whether I'm right or wrong, that's it. I'm not a restaurateur.
That's the switch you can't
but that's
turn
the
off.
Switch I can't turn off. Like I can just see what I think would be the preferred future for this place. And the second word would be some ability to communicate that vision. So a visionary communicator those are the 2 words that I sort of landed on when I went through this exercise several years ago. And that's actually helped me to say, okay, am I in a place where I feel like this switch that God has given me can come on? And if you're in a place where you've got a switch that never has the opportunity to come on, that's hard. That's a hard place to be. It's hard to live into our purpose when it's misaligned and it's never going to be perfect. We're always looking for, I read books that talk about how to refine, where you're at, like get more and more of in your sweet spot, where more and more of your time is spent doing the thing that is most natural and effective for you. But I think that's another way. And there's lots of different ways, I think, of getting at our purpose. And then how does that play out in our natural abilities, the experiences that God has given us that have formed us over the years, because we learn from experience. What are the opportunities in front of me to leverage those things? And who am I? Like, what's my core identity? And I think that's where the Christian gospel has something unique to say. I mean, all those things can be true for anybody out in a secular sense, but that God has wired me the way that I am, because it's a reflection of part of who he is. And I think that both empowers our purpose, puts wind in those sails, and also takes some of the pressure off of having to be great. Like we all have, like most of us have we want to be great. We have this, inner desire for greatness. But when I think part of the Christian identity is it's God's greatness, and I get the privilege of having a piece of it. And so my life is going to matter because he's the one who gives it purpose. And value, it's not dependent on me to achieve some level of purpose from my life to have value. No, it has value just because God created me and gave me the opportunity to be and to do the things that he's called me to.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that's funny that it was 2 words so the same program I went through, we had to answer it in 1 word.
Oh,
And
even harder.
Then so that connecting it back to connection,
Yeah.
you had to ask someone else who's close to you, how would you
Yeah.
describe
Was there 1 word for you?
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah.
How
So
did that go?
mine, it may have been heavily influenced by me watching Ted Lasso at the time, but as time has passed, I feel even more convinced of it. But mine was coach,
Okay.
because that's just, and I think it's a good way to kind of wrap up what we've been talking about. And we were talking about this after we recorded the last podcast. But really what we're saying our mission as a church is, and I think what we're called to as Christians and what God wants is he wants humanity, his creation, to flourish. And I think
Yeah.
what we're saying as a church is we want to be a part of bringing about human flourishing in our specific context and our specific community. And we think that looks like bringing healing, connection, and purpose to people through the love of Jesus.
Yeah.
In Lake Norman.
Here we are.
And here we are.
So that's what we're trying to do.
Yep.
And we want to leverage every resource that we have toward those purposes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, this might be my favorite podcast we've ever done. We hope you think the same thing.
Yeah.
So if you enjoyed this and you're listening all the way through the end of this episode, share this with somebody who you think may benefit from these ideas, these concepts. And we appreciate you guys so much for listening week in and week out. And if you're new to it, that's who we are as a church. And we want to say if you don't have a church community or you're looking for a place to find out more about Jesus or worship with his community, then we would love to have you. Our website's in the description, and we would love an opportunity to connect with you. But until next week, we hope you all have a great week. And that's all she wrote for us this time. Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening to the end of the episode. If you're enjoying these conversations each week, do us a favor. Hit that subscribe button right here on YouTube or the follow button wherever you listen to podcasts. It's quick, it's free, it's easy, and it makes a huge difference in helping our podcast reach more people in the Lake Norman community. Thank you for supporting the For Lake Norman podcast, and we hope you have a great week.